Right, joining us now is Janae Nelson, President and Director Counsel of the Legal Defense Fund. Janae argued Louisiana versus Calais before the Supreme Court.
Janae, can you just lay out for the folks at home the current ground that we are all now standing on, given what the court ruled this morning?
Yes, we're standing on quicksand. We, as a democracy, are sinking. And we're doing that with the Supreme Court putting weights on our ankles. Okay, that's where we are. The Supreme Court's decision today is one of the most disingenuous legal opinions I've read in my entire life. They have scuttled stare decisis, which is the principle that requires the court to follow its own precedent so that we have reliable doctrine to use as we craft the laws that will govern for years and years by similarly disgruntled voters and those who didn't believe that Black people should have protections for the right to vote. The Supreme Court has defended it up until today. And also the right to vote. The right to vote is sacrosanct. The Supreme Court has held for, well over a century that it is preservative of all rights. But today, we saw a Supreme Court justice, joined by 5 others, twist the law, write and effectively lie on page in saying that they were doing very little. They were only updating a test. They were only clarifying some points of law. But what they ultimately did was make it utterly impossible to enforce Section 2 in a way that can protect Black voters, Latino voters, Native American voters, and other voters who are routinely subject to voter discrimination, and especially in the area of redistricting, where votes are diluted by drawing voters into lines or spreading them out across districts so that they have no ability to elect candidates of their choice and therefore don't have adequate representation in our governing bodies. This is a catastrophe, and it has put our democracy in severe peril.
Janae, I want to pick up on the point that you just made about how that representation actually looks when they do this. When I was chairman of the Maryland Republican Party in 2000, I sued the state because the state drew a map in which my county, Prince George's County, then one of the most affluent majority Black counties in the country, out of 800,000 people, you're looking at 620,000 African Americans. They drew a map in which the people of that county were represented in the state Senate by 5 white individuals out of 8 state legislative senators. So out of 8, you get, how do you do the math there? And so that's what we're talking about here. That representation, when you draw a line to weight it against the people who live in a particular area, so that their voice is either diluted or not represented at all. This is what it looks like, and this is the future that this court has set in place. When I go back to what Justice Kagan said in her dissent, that is calling this a racial dilution. That is a racial vote dilution in its most classic form. A minority community that is cohesive in its geography and politics alike, and that faces continued adversity from racial division, is split. Cracked is the usual term, so that it loses all its electoral influence. That's what we're talking about here. Barack Obama, in his statement, notes the good news is that such setbacks can be overcome. But that will only happen if citizens across the country who cherish our democratic ideals continue to mobilize and vote in record numbers, not just in the upcoming midterms or in high-profile races, but in every election and every level. That is why, in coming into this conversation, I said at the end, y'all, it's on us now. The American people have to decide. What say you, Janae?
I could not agree more. The court made very clear today that it will not save this democracy. It will not prevent the erosion of our civil rights. It will not put any constraint on the partisan politics that have completely corrupted and corroded our electoral process, and that the only measure we have, in addition to peaceful protest, in addition to public discourse and education, et cetera, the only recourse we have is one of the most powerful tools that still exists, although it could be diluted, as you point out, but that is the right to vote. And I will say that it is urgent, because even though former President Obama correctly counsels us that it's not just this upcoming midterm, I dare say that with this decision, the maps that will govern congressional elections, state legislative elections, city council elections, school board elections, water board elections, any time that we need to vote on district lines, we know that those lines can now be much more easily manipulated, and it'll be very difficult to challenge them. And so this upcoming midterm election may be one of the last ones, unless we elect a Congress that's willing to do the work and preserve our voting rights, may be the very last one where we are voting on maps that are even recognizable as resembling any measure of fairness, because the Supreme Court has invited lawmakers to disenfranchise Americans openly and with impunity.